The FTC just recently banned all non-competes across all 50 states in the United States. And this has caused quite a ruffle with business owners, especially small business owners who are now asking so many questions like, why would I move a contractor from a contractor to an employee if I'm not even protected against them starting their own business now? And how can I protect myself when it comes to my employees not taking all of my confidential information and starting their own business tomorrow right next door? So, you guys, today we're going to dig into all of the things that this new ban on non-compete agreements means for you as a business owner and how you can protect yourself and your business as you're bringing on team members, either as an employee or as a contractor. In today's episode, my guest, Paige Griffith, is digging into all things legal when it comes to the new FTC non-compete ban and what you can do to protect your business as you're growing your team. So let's get right into it. Hey there, CEOs. This is the Wedding Pro CEO podcast, and I'm your host, Brandee Gaar. I'm a wedding pro just like you who's built one of the largest planning firms in Orlando, Florida. But it wasn't that long ago when that success came with long days, sleepless nights, and little to no pay. Fast forward to today, and I have the business that I've always dreamed of, a killer team, steady profits, and weekends with my family. Over the past 3 years, I've taught over 1,000 wedding pros how to do the same. My mission is to create a movement of wedding pros who are building a profitable business that they've always dreamed of. Paige, I am so excited to have you back on the show. You have been a multi-time guest and obviously one of our partners. We love having our students be able to go to the Legal Paige and get all their legal advice for their small business. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So Paige, today we're going to get right into it because there is such a hot topic going around for all business owners, but it's been super hot for small business owners in particular. Like, what do I do about this new ban on non-competes? And I have so many questions for you today that I can't wait to ask. But can you kind of catch everybody up if they don't know what this ban is, what even is happening?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, basically issued a final ruling. They've been thinking about it for a while. This has kind of been in the political landscape, honestly, for the past 4 years. Okay. And it kind of ebbs and flows depending on the political landscape of the US and how much like federal kind of authority is going to be involved in employment and contractor relationships. So I always want to preface it like that because things can change, right? That's why we have the democracy that we have and the court system that we have and the legal landscape that we have. But the FTC ruling was really this first federal-wide sweeping authority saying that non-compete clauses and non-compete contracts are no longer valid in employment agreements. People are asking, well, does that mean that they can be in contractor agreements? It didn't really say much about contractor agreements. Non-competes were never allowed in contractor agreements. So if you've ever had non-compete clauses or had to sign a non-compete contract and you're a contractor with somebody, it was never valid to begin with. So the ruling really says you cannot have non-competes anymore in general employment agreements between an employer and an employee. The only caveat to this is with senior executives. They have to like make a lot of money, like over $150,000. And then those non-competes still have to be extremely strict. For all of us small business owners, that probably doesn't apply, right? And you have to be a for-profit business. The FTC only has regulation over for-profit businesses. So if you're a nonprofit, this obviously wouldn't apply to you. That is what's really going on. The FTC basically said like they are trying to serve legitimate business interests across the United States. And of course, that while like protecting trade secrets is important, preventing unfair competition in the marketplace is more paramount to them and is more important to the entire like working economy as a whole. And there's so many negative and kind of discriminatory effects with non-competes. Yeah. And obviously, us as business owners, we're like, oh, great. But for employees, it's a big win for them. Yeah. And it's kind of a big win for the economy as a whole to really be like, well, we can work for someone, we can learn lots of things, and then either go work for a competitor with those skill sets that we learned, or start our own business. And that leaves a lot of us as small business owners very concerned. So that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like I have non-competes in all my employee agreements, but they're very, very employee sided, if I'm being honest. And I was given that advice early on, like make it
Yep.
reasonable, right? Like there should be a very short cooling off period, so they can't literally like start their business kind of while they're working for you and then tomorrow open and have a client base. So we have had a very small cooling off period that I felt like just allowed it to, for that specific reason. Like you can't just start your new business tomorrow from working for me. And so I'm super disappointed. I'm not going to lie. I feel like it makes it very challenging for small business owners, as you kind of said, of like, wow, so somebody can literally come learn everything from me and then open their business right away. But it is what it is. No one can be you. So for anybody that's listening, freaking out, nobody can be you. And I think that's why it's so important that you understand how to market yourself and what you do and what your brand is and your reputation and your relationships in the industry, because no one can take that from you no matter what. That said, I know that there's some questions that have come up from my students and lots of chatter within my group. So one of the biggest questions that I'm hoping you can help us answer today, Paige, is what would be the benefit now of somebody moving somebody from a contractor to an employee? Because one of the biggest things was like, you're more protected. So can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing that I also want people to understand is non-competes in general were not like allowed in every single state.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brandee, I wanted to touch on what you said
Yeah.
because you were given advice to create a non-compete clause probably in your employment contracts
Mm-hmm.
with your employees that were a little they have to be very limited in scope is
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying, and that's the legal term for it. So, geographic wise, they have to be pretty limited. You can't say like someone can't go create, say, a wedding planning business 3 states away.
Right.
Like that's never going to hold up in court. It's just they can't be in like the same vicinity as you and take all of your like clients and same venues and all of those types of things, right?
Yep.
In terms of and you said, limited in time. So
Yep.
it's scope and time, region and time. It's important to us because we don't want someone to go, yeah, learn something from us and then at the same time build their business and then open something
Yeah.
very, very similar. Maybe you have like a 6-month time period or a
That's what ours
12-month
was.
time period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has to be pretty short.
Mm-hmm.
But still, there's a non-compete in there. I think a lot of times employers are hanging their hat on non-competes too much because here's the deal. No matter where you live, you need to check with an employment lawyer to see if non-competes are even valid in your state to begin with. Lots of states don't really favor them, and so they're going to side with the employees no matter what. So even if you had a non-compete in a state that doesn't really allow non-competes, like it's kind of a null and void clause in your contract to begin with.
Okay.
With you got advice from an attorney that was saying, yes, you can have them, but like, let's limit it. So that's important to know as we move forward. And Brandee, we can kind of discuss like what's going to happen with this FTC ruling, because that's also a consideration we all need to make as employees or as employers. In terms of like the benefits to having employees still, I think that they are amazing compared to contractors.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. I have employees, Brandee has employees. I think we have both experienced kind of the transition from a contractor to an employee, or having like a bad apple employee and then feeling like we need to move back to contractors, or having longevity with employees and feeling that loyalty and commitment. For me, that is why employees far exceed the benefits of contractors. I know that in the small business world, we all really, really like contractors,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's easier to cut ties with. You can terminate at any time. So it's like you can dabble, right? Like you can get your feet wet. You can work with this person, see if they work out. If they don't, there's like no harm, no foul. But you don't get to control their schedules as much. It's just like, here's the project, try to finish it. You don't get to talk with them as much. There's just that not all in aspect that there is with an employee. I want control over my employees' work schedules and tasks and being able to talk to them day in and day out. And I want their loyalty and commitment to me. There's a lot of like culture and values in the company that come with having employees. Also, I personally, I'm in the boat of, again, like you said,
Legally legit
they can't
business.
be you.
Yes.
What'd you say?
I said having a legally legit business because I
Yeah,
always think
having a
about that
legally
too.
legit business, of course.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes non-competes just put employees off or prospective employees off.
Mhm.
So if you maybe just had non-disparagement clauses, non-solicitation clauses, those types of things in your contracts, of course, a confidentiality clause, but you just don't have this like strict non-compete with employees, and you offer them other things
Mhm.
like good compensation, benefits, like flexible work environments, they're going to be more committed to you. And if they like the culture of your business, they're going to stay. And I have seen the output from employees far exceed contractors. And I think we both are nodding our heads here.
Yes, yes, 100%. I think it's such a culture shift. Every time I have a student join my program, and I feel like the number one battle I have with wedding pros is you need to move these contractors to employees. There's a time and a place for contractors, don't get me wrong. Like having, a great copywriter that you can, throw on
Right.
contract, or somebody that's literally just going to show up on wedding day to help you pick stuff up and put stuff down, when you need additional help. Great, that's fine. But as you're trying to scale a business, having those employees bought into your culture, bought into your brand, understanding how you're trying to move the company forward and what your vision is, there's so much to that. So I'm glad that you touched on that, Paige, because those are like intangible, right? They're so intangible. And one of the things that I hear all the time from business owners is they'll be like, but then I have to pay their payroll tax. And I'm like, you understand we're literally stepping over dollars to make pennies, right? Like this is
Yes.
crazy that we're even talking about payroll tax. If you're loving this video and you want to know more about how I help wedding pros double and even triple their revenue, all while working less, I want to invite you to my free training. We have a link in the description below. You can grab the link, grab your seat, sit down, and be ready to take notes, because I'm going to walk you through my exact strategy for booking consistent 5-figure months in my wedding business. Grab the link in the description below because I cannot wait to see you there. Because of how much an employee can change the face of your business. But I know that this whole non-compete thing is making people think, well, I knew I couldn't have a non-compete with a contractor, but I could with an employee. And so now what's the point? What's the difference? And I think you're really answering that with, there's so many intangibles that are there with an employee, right?
Absolutely. When you have someone that's a little bit more all in with your business, they are going to work better for you. They're going to work harder for you. Your projects are going to come out better. Contractors are independent by nature, right? Like they're going to work for multiple businesses at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love that. That's one of the reasons I love employees. I only want them to work for my business.
Mm-hmm.
Their mental capacity is all there
Yeah.
just for my company versus trying every day to piece together 5 different clients and figure out like how I'm going to fulfill my projects with them, probably at like 70% capacity max.
Yes.
And I want my employees at 80-90% capacity. I don't expect them to be 100%,
Yeah.
right, all the time. That's just, we're all humans. But I also want longevity. I think you know that, working with employees, giving them benefits and perks, increasing their pay, yes, but maybe like shifting them around in the business, giving them more authority in the business, giving them more like changing their title, their roles in the business to what makes most sense for them. Moving up, people really like that. They feel really good about that. And training an employee versus training a contractor and someone who is at least working part-time for you, but full-time employees in particular, they are going to create things for your business so quickly once you put in the time and effort to train them efficiently and effectively at the get-go. And contractors are going to take months, like months and months and months and months. Sometimes it takes, I think, like 6 to 12 months for a really good contractor to start working for my company. And a lot of times we as small business owners, we don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
We have a couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks to train someone to get them to where we need them to be. And that is where an employee comes into play.
Yeah, one of the things I've been talking about a lot lately is that a lot of times small business owners, they want this huge commitment from people that they're not giving any commitment back to, right? So you have a contractor that you maybe give 10 or 12 events a year, and those aren't even guaranteed, but you want them to be available for all of the dates that you give them. And that doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't compute that would make any sense. So then there becomes this frustration of like, well, I'm just going to stay me because it's not working with having employees. I'm like, that's not an employee, that's a contractor. It's so frustrating. So yeah, getting that buy-in, I think, is a really, really big one. I wanted to ask, well, one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on too, you were saying non-competes aren't even legal in some states. So I think that there are definitely non-competes that are out there that aren't legal. They wouldn't hold up anyway. But even if they did, can we talk about that for a second? Because I think that you touched on this. You said a lot of small business owners are hanging their hats on the fact that they have this non-compete. But like, you would actually have to go try to enforce it.
Yeah.
So can we touch on that for a second? Because I want people to, I think people are genuinely freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? Why would I bring in an employee? I have no protection now. And I want to kind of explain like what you would have had to do even if you had a non-compete before.
Yeah, I mean, you have to enforce your contract, right? Your contract is only as good as your willingness to enforce it. I say that time and time again, every time that I talk about anything legal dealing with contracts. And I think business owners that have employees and have non-compete clauses in there or a non-compete agreement that's attached to their employment agreement, they kind of just think like that's going to solve all their problems and they can wave a magic wand and be like, you can't compete with me.
Yeah.
No, they probably can and will if they want to go that route. Again, it's like, it's more of like a scare tactic, I would say, employment wise, where you're saying like, please don't do this. So the goal of those non-compete clauses and non-compete contracts is to hopefully deter people from competing with you for like a certain period of time. That's the ideal world, right? I think yours is maybe around 6 months. Okay, let's just use that as a hypothetical here. You're just saying like, please don't do something for 6 months. If they feel like I am someone who's going to follow a contract that I signed and I'm not going to risk the potential for my employer to like file a lawsuit against me, and lots of employees are. They're very risky and they're like, I'm just going to violate this non-compete and see what happens because I don't know if my employer has the balls or the guts to like come and fight me on it. So they're going to do what they want to do. That's I always say that in employment law. Like, employees are going to do what they had anticipated doing from the get-go of working for you. So it's also like the culture that you create at your company, right? If they have loyalty and commitment to you, and I think the word commitment is what's important here. And you were saying this too, Brandee. Like, if you're not fully committed with them, they're not going to be fully committed with you. And you were saying that in kind of the wedding industry as a whole, like you expect them to commit to you and commit to these days, but you're not even making them an employee. It doesn't make sense. Like, those two don't go hand in hand. They're not going to go all in with you in your business, or like I said, 80 to 90% in with you in your business if they don't get the benefits of being an employee. There's a lot of other benefits, right? Unemployment, workers' compensation. They don't have to file their own taxes. It comes out on their W-2s. There's a lot of benefits there. They're not running their own companies and have all of that baggage to deal with. They're just working for you. It's a nice gig for a lot of people. The majority of like the United States workers are W-2 employees for a reason. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I kind of answered your question there in terms it like a roundabout way. There's so many reasons why employees are still a really good idea for business owners.
Yeah, I mean, I recently told this story on Instagram. I think I kind of did a story time about how I got burned from having nothing in place. Legitimately, like nothing in place. This was way back when I first started my business and I should have known better, to be honest, but I didn't, or I was maybe just trying to, not pay attention to all the things people were telling me. But we had nothing in place. I had a contractor. She ended up doing a lot of things that moral code weren't right in general, but I had nothing to protect myself anyway, right? Fast forward, I now have employee agreements, I have independent contractor agreements and associate agreements. We have all of that in place, but I've had an employee leave who was not a great fit from the beginning. We mutually decided to part ways. She tried to start her company within her non-compete period, and honestly, I was like, what? Who cares? Like, at the end of the day, I was like, am I really going to fight this in court? Like, I don't want to deal with it. And to be honest, I don't think she's going to be able to do what we've done. Right. So I didn't, and she's no longer in the industry. So I think we put too much protection in these non-competes. And I think, honestly, for me, what I've found solace in with the non-compete is more just that I hope to hire good people. For most of the people you hire, you hope to be good people. And it's almost like a gentleman's handshake. Like, am I going to enforce it? Probably not. Am I going to go to court about it? Probably not. I'm not saying I wouldn't ever, but I probably won't. But we both agreed to this. And so it kind of, to me, feels like a gentleman's handshake. And honestly, in 17 years, besides those two incidents, I've never had anybody else. Most of the people that have left have been like, I know I have a non-compete, totally fine. And I'm like, whatever, do what you want. But at the end of the day, I just think that I think it's not that big a deal for us as small business owners, this non-compete situation, banning them, because we would have had to enforce them anyway. And I don't know that many small business owners that are going to spend that much time and money to enforce a non-compete anyway.
Yeah, it's the capacity at which they're violating the non-compete too, right?
Right.
That's exactly what you're saying and kind of what I meant to say in my answer. And then I, got sidetracked a little bit. So coming back to that, it really is like, if I'm thinking about my employees right now, like what would they have to do? And I have non-competes because they're allowed in my state. And they're limited on scope and time, but like at what capacity would this particular employee need to violate it in order for me to want to enforce it? Say, like, I have a marketing director. She does like all of the back end marketing for TLP. If she just went and worked as a marketing, like left me and went and worked as a marketing director for another online business that wasn't an online virtual legal business, I'd probably be like, cool, right? Like, the competition, the capacity of the competition, it's not super damaging or impacting on me. And that's important, right? What are your damages? That's what a court is going to look at. That's what a mediator or an arbiter is going to look at. Do you really have a lot of damages from them competing with you and your business? And that's kind of what the FTC is saying here. Like, the pros and cons and like the scale and the balance is more favorable for them competing and, being able to create a more competitive environment in the economy, and like people should be able to do what they want to do and like use the skill sets that they gained working from you. And I think it's employers that are just enforcing these sweeping across the board that's creating these issues for workers where they're like, I can't even use the skill sets that I learned working for you to go work for like a similar business, but not the same business. For me, it's like if you were to basically take all of my trade secrets, all of my copyrighted materials, and start the exact same business, that would be a problem.
Right.
Or if I started seeing like Facebook ads and like marketing campaigns that were identical to mine that you are now taking. And again, and we can get into this, like other ways you can craft things in your employment agreements with like confidentiality clauses, ensuring your trade secrets are safe. That would make me want to enforce a non-compete. So it'd be a breach of contract, breaching a non-compete, but I'd also probably stick in like breaching my confidentiality clause. Non-solicitation clauses, again, like if you are poaching all of my clients, we have an issue here. So hopefully that answered it in a little bit more of a legal respect in terms of what I would do, but my contracts and like how enforcing non-competes would really work in real time if it were to be violated.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. And it actually leads me into my next question, which is, okay, so let's say that the non-competes are going away, right? I know it's still, the law was passed, or was put there, but it's not. Tell us the legal term for what actually happened with this, because it's not official yet, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So what I thought would happen did happen. It's not a surprise. Welcome to the legal world. Welcome to the federal government trying to have authority on state kind of
Issues.
laws
Yeah.
and things that states have really been able to enforce, which is contract laws and employment laws. It's very, very state based. When a federal governmental department like the FTC comes in and makes this sweeping authority, we're going to have issues and we're going to have lawsuits. So that's what occurred. We have 2 lawsuits challenging the FTC's authority to issue this type of ban. They're actually in Texas. There's probably venue shopping happening there, which means they're filing suit in a federal district court in a location that's probably more favorable to the plaintiffs where they're filing suit. And it's funny. As we all know, it's kind of like Texas, Alabama, like what the heck is going on in these states? Of course it's Texas.
Right.
So what does this mean, right? Like both suits are arguing that the FTC has exceeded its authority. Basically, they're saying the agency didn't have the power to issue this federal ban.
Okay.
That's important to know. And even if it did, they're saying like the categorical ban on non-competes isn't lawful. So like it needs to be a little bit more piecemeal of a like sweeping regulation. It's interesting in my opinion. And this is where I can like go full legal page on you because I worked in federal court. I totally know how this goes. And I think how like laws get enforced and implemented and then go through the court system is fascinating to me. And I honestly, with a lot of things that have happened in the Supreme Court in the past few years, I think a lot of just, general lay people they're more in tune with what's going on in the court system too and how laws are being enforced or not enforced. So because this was already handled at the state level and there are tons of like cases and precedent in certain states regarding non-competes, states like have kind of their own skin in the game here, especially like in Texas and places where these lawsuits are popping up. We have to know that when it's in court, it's like this gray area, and it's not a fun gray area to be in as business owners because we're like, okay, so there's lawsuits being filed. So is this ban actually valid?
Right.
Yes, right now it is because there's no like injunction, which means to stop, right? There's nothing saying that this ban has to stop right now.
Okay.
It might occur, but I don't think it will. And if it did, it's going to be pretty limited to the plaintiffs in these cases and maybe their employees. However, it has to go through the court system, which takes so much time. So it's going to start at federal court and then it'll go to the appellate court. And I mean, I don't know if the Supreme Court would pick up this type of case. They only pick up like 80 cases a year. But still, to even get to the appellate level and to have an opinion, it's going to take a year or 2.
Okay.
So we're in this limbo land. And just to paint a picture for everybody, that's where we're at right now.
Okay.
The ban is still intact. So we need to address it with our employment agreements. We, however, probably need to talk to employment lawyers in our state and see like how the employment law industry in our state is handling this type of issue. Employment lawyers are jumping on phone calls. They're jumping on webinars with other employment lawyers in their state. And they're trying to say, okay, here are the case law and precedent that we have in our state. Here's this FTC ban. How are we mixing those together? And how are we adequately informing our clients to move forward with their employment agreements? I would tell you in the small business world, it's probably best to pull back on non-competes right now, just a little bit, and do other things with your contracts. But I want everyone to know that there is the possibility here in the next year or 2 that this ban could literally be struck down. And in that case, then we're back to the land of
state by state.
Non-competes may or may not be valid in your state.
Yes.
So it's a gray area. It always is. Like lawyers say, well, it depends. It really does in this situation, especially because now we have lawsuits being filed.
Got it. So as a small business owner, right? So our listeners, you're extremely familiar with the wedding industry, having been a wedding photographer. our listeners are small business owners, less than 10 employees likely. So
Totally.
for right now, your advice would be pull back on your non-compete while this is gray, because right now we have to kind of lean on the fact that it is in place, right? For right now, it's
Yep.
more likely that it's in place than that it's not. So you had mentioned a couple of different clauses. I want to help our listeners to understand what are some other things that can be in your contract that can protect you that honestly are probably going to be easier to enforce anyway than a non-compete would have been. What are some of those clauses that we should have in our contracts to protect us?
Okay, so the FTC ban, first and foremost, let's go through the steps.
Okay.
It requires business owners to notify their employees that their non-compete agreements or non-compete clauses are no longer valid.
Right.
It's saying you immediately need to do that.
Okay.
If I were your lawyer, which I am not,
Right.
but I am going to give you kind of more like general advice here on what to do. And I don't know what state you live in. So again, that's why I always make disclaimers like go talk to an employment lawyer. But if I'm looking at this law and I'm kind of looking generally at what non-competes would look like in the wedding industry, employment contracts as a whole, I would say you need to do that. But in that email, you need to point out other clauses, and hopefully you have these in your contracts. If you don't, maybe the best course of action is to say, like, according to this new ruling that came out, I think we need to sign a new employment agreement. And one that's probably going to feel good for your employees. Like, okay, you're seeing what's going on out there. You're a professional, you're taking action. And what I would do is I would point to either other clauses in the contract that if you already had them in there, and we'll talk about them,
Okay.
or I would have a new employment agreement that took out non-competes, but I would highlight a couple of these clauses. Okay. So there's like two ways to go about it because I don't know what your contract says and how good it is, your employment agreement. So you need to strengthen them.
Okay.
You need to have a really robust confidentiality clause. This is all about trade secrets. So what are your trade secrets? Do you keep them secret? That's really important. You can't like try to enforce someone breaching a trade secret if it's like really not a secret in your business and you tell everyone and anyone, like all of your employees and all of your contractors. But if it's something that you only share with this one employee, like your numbers or your client lists or like
Okay.
pricing strategies or things along those lines, that would be a trade secret under your confidentiality clause. So have a good confidentiality clause. And Brandee, we briefly discussed this, but actually before we pressed record, but some people are confused between an NDA and a confidentiality clause.
Mhm.
So a confidentiality clause is just that. It's a clause relating to the confidential information that you would give to an employee or that they might come into like they might come into being at your business, and what you can and cannot do with that confidential information.
Okay.
An NDA says the exact same thing. It's just like a four-cornered agreement. So it's like a one-pager document versus like a one-paragraph clause. They're very similar. I like full NDAs because it's a better way for you to be like, here is the confidential information that you may come about in my business, and I don't want you to do XYZ with it. With a four-cornered agreement, they can never say like, well, I didn't really see that in your employment agreement, and it was like hidden in the middle in a confidentiality clause. So a lot of times I say like confidentiality, employee shall abide by the accompanied non-disclosure agreement that they'll sign in addition to this employment agreement. But they're the same things. So just so people know, it's not like you need to have a confidentiality clause and an NDA.
Okay.
You need to have one or the other.
Okay.
And have a really good, you might be able to put in a non-solicitation clause. Non-solicitation clauses get very, very sticky in terms of how they're written. So don't try to write a non-solicitation clause by yourself because it can oftentimes look like a non-compete. And they have to be really, really limited to like certain types of customers, like client lists, things along those lines. You can't really say like you can't do something that would like potentially have this client like find you in their own respect and decide to like move over to you.
Okay.
It's just you can't call up my clients, right? And solicit them
Right.
and say come to my business. So just be very careful with a non-solicitation clause, but that one and like a confidentiality clause or an or an NDA is kind of the best practice here for ensuring that at least your trade secrets are protected.
Yeah. Okay. I like that anyway. My employee agreements also have those in there, but I like those anyway because it really just outlines like do this, don't do this. Like it's a very it's very practical and and like I said, at the end of the day, oh, it might just be having almost 20 years in this industry at this point. I'm like, I don't care. Go start your own business. Like, good luck, because it's not easy and we make it look easy as business owners a lot of times.
Mm,
And
good
at the
point.
end of the day, they're not you. So, again, kind of going back to the beginning of the episode is even more reason that you need to make sure that you've got great relationships, you've got a great reputation in your market, and that you really are building that brand that's uniquely yours. So, all right, Paige, you guys are right in the middle of your mid-year sale, right? So can you tell us all about this? Because I look forward to this every single year. I tell all my students, like, this is the time to get in with the Legal Paige because they have the best contracts and clauses. So can you tell us about the mid-year sale?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now from May 20th through May 23rd, we have 40% off our entire shop. We do this a couple times a year and people really look forward to it and
Yeah.
anticipate it. So we're excited to offer this right now. It's a great time to kind of add things to your legal toolkit. As Brandee and I mentioned today, non-disclosure agreements may be something you want to look into, or a more robust employment agreement or independent contractor agreement. And we also have really specific contracts for specific industries. So if you're a wedding planner and you have associates, whether they're employees or contractors, we have contracts for that. If you're a photographer, we have kind of associate contracts in that respect as well. Second shooter contracts that have a lot of that information relating to that contractor relationship in there. So all are really, really good to look into as you are understanding kind of the legal landscape of being a business owner and making
Mhm.
sure that you're being more legally legit as you move forward in your business, as you hire on help, as you're also wanting to protect the business that you've worked so hard to create more and more.
Yes, it's so good too. I tell all of my students, I'm like, anytime the Legal Page is running a sale, like you need to make sure, okay, am I going to be hiring an employee in the next year? Am I going to be bringing on new contractors? Am I going to start adding associates? Because now is the time to get those agreements. And even if you don't have somebody right this second, it's such a great sale. I mean, 40% off is amazing. So you want to jump over there, go over to the Legal Page. We're going to put all of the links in the show notes. And I'm going to personally link some of my favorite contracts that we use in my business and that I tell all of my students to grab. So I'll link those specific contracts in the show notes so you guys can go grab them. And Paige, thank you so much. This is so helpful. I feel like I have a better grasp on it, and I know that our listeners are going to as well. So thanks so much for being here.
Of course, I hope you guys learned something.
If this video was helpful, make sure to check out the other linked videos that we have in the description to learn all about the strategies we teach to help you double and even triple your wedding business revenue.